Welcome to AI Meets Productivity, your weekly podcast between myself, Trevor Lawbert, a productivity expert, and ChatGPT, an artificial intelligence. This week, we're going to discuss why you should stop throwing boomerangs. And we'll get into in a minute exactly what that means. But first, welcome ChatGPT.
Hey, Trevor. Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to dive into this topic. Let's help our listeners understand why throwing boomerangs can mess with their productivity.
Can you first just explain to our listeners what a boomerang is in this context?
Absolutely. A boomerang in this context refers to any action you take that sets you up for a future interruption. Think of sending a text, email, or leaving a voicemail. You might think it's just a quick task, but it's like throwing a boomerang. Eventually, it's going to come back, often when you least expect it.
And so why are these boomerangs so harmful for our productivity?
These boomerangs are harmful because they create unpredictable interruptions. You might be deep in focus, working on something important, and then, boom, a reply comes back and breaks your concentration. It's like setting traps for yourself that you don't know when will go off.
That's an excellent point. And so what do we need to do? How do we avoid throwing these boomerangs then?
The key is to be strategic about when you send out these potential interruptions. Wait until you have time to handle the replies before you send messages. Also, turn off notifications during deep focus times to minimize distractions. And if you really need to send something out, let the person know you'll respond later or give them a specific time frame.
And I think this really applies to things like texts and things where people are used to responding immediately. Like if it's an email, I could send that out and I'm not really expecting a boomerang. Or if a boomerang comes back, a reply comes back quickly, I don't need to process it immediately if the user isn't expecting me to reply quickly. Correct?
Exactly, Trevor. With emails, there's often an unspoken understanding that responses might take longer. But for texts and instant messages, people expect quicker replies, which can create those disruptive boomerangs. So managing expectations and setting boundaries is crucial.
So what happens if you really do need to throw a boomerang? What are some strategies that we can use to help manage expectations?
If you really need to throw a boomerang, try to control how and when it comes back. For example, let people know you're going into focus mode and will reply later, or leave specific times in your message when you're available for a call back. And always follow the 3 A's. Acknowledge the request, ask about its priority, and answer based on urgency and importance.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, when you ask what the priority is, also ask when an answer is needed by, because oftentimes a customer or someone will send us an email or send us a request, and we assume it needs an immediate response or a response by a certain time, but it may not. And by asking, we get to then find out what the real priority is.
Absolutely, Trevor. By asking when an answer is needed, you get a clearer picture of the urgency. It helps you manage your time better and avoid unnecessary stress. Plus, it sets a precedent that you respond thoughtfully, not just quickly.
Finally, what happens if I have a block of time right before an important meeting or important focus time where I actually do want to go process all these emails or try to start sending these things? Are there any strategies I can use to do the work without throwing the boomerangs?
Yes, Trevor, there are a few strategies you can use. First, you can draft your messages, but schedule them to send later after your focus time. This way, you get the work done without the immediate interruption risk. Another option is to clearly communicate your availability in your messages, indicating when you'll be able to respond. And lastly, if something requires a quick response, make sure to get to a good stopping point in your current task before diving into it.
And how do things like time blocking help with throwing and catching boomerangs?
Time blocking is a powerful tool. Organized by allocating specific times for communication tasks, you can handle all your emails and messages in dedicated slots. This means you're not constantly interrupted during deep work periods. It helps you stay focused and manage your time efficiently, knowing you'll address those boomerangs during your set communication blocks.
Okay, great. I think that really covers the topic of why you should avoid throwing boomerangs and how to do it. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye to our listeners?
Just remember, controlling your boomerangs is all about managing interruptions, and staying focused. Be strategic with your communication, and you'll find it much easier to maintain your productivity. Thanks for listening, everyone, and keep those boomerangs in check.
Thank you, everyone, for another episode of AI Meets Productivity, your weekly podcast between myself and ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also go to aimeetsproductivity.podbean.com to find all the episodes. For those who are interested in the technology behind recording this episode, you may have noticed that this episode sounded a little bit different. That's because I'm now using the ChatGPT desktop application and the voice mode within that application to record this episode. So no longer are we using the phone or using this custom application I built. We're now using the desktop application. We're also using the ChatGPT 4.0 model, which now has snappier results, and the delays between talking and responding are already a lot faster, even though we haven't actually gotten the new real-time voice mode that will be coming out in a few weeks. So hope you enjoyed this episode, and talk to you next week.